It's Tuesday, June 4th, 2024. We're here at Carver with new Iowa head women's basketball coach, Jan Jensen.
Old new coach, kind of, right?
First question, you just said that you're moving offices right now. You're, physically, moving from spot to spot. What's that been like?
Well, when we've been here about, 24 years, I don't know how long we've been in our new office space, newer. When we got hired, we were, in the bowels of Carver, and then we built the new practice facility, which is probably 10, 12 years ago, somewhere in there. So you haven't really done a lot to your office, right? So even though I'm just moving about 15 feet, down the hallway, I just wanted to kind of move in with a clean slate. So just like kind of the job title shift itself, which is nostalgic, so is going through the files, because we've been here 24 years, and I've been, working or playing for Lisa for 33 years, and coaching with Jenny, right, for, 29, 30, whatever it is. So in the files, right, there's stuff from Drake, right? I ran across photos of when, Lisa was coaching me, and I've run across photos of when Jenny and I were playing. So you run across photos of when we were coaching together at Drake, and then certainly tons of different files of us coaching together here. Mm-hmm. So how is it? It's kind of like a walk down memory lane, really, while you're trying to organize. Mm-hmm. When I run into fans, right, they're kind of like, oh, we're so sad about Lisa, but we're so happy you mm-hmm. got it. And then they're kind of looking at me, and I'm like, same. You can't close that chapter without nostalgia, without sentimentality, and I think that's the greatest emotion, is that you're just so grateful for everything that was, but someone's got to fill the chair, right? So I'm just so grateful that it gets to be me, and it's a seismic shift in many ways, but in other ways there's a lot of continuity. So. A lot of emotions, but I've always said the overriding one is gratitude, because it's just been a ride, and looking forward to all that's to come.
So I think you said when Lisa came and brought you your coffee, it might have been May 9th. Yes. You talked to Beth that next Friday. Yeah. So I think it was maybe 7 days between the time that she told you that she was going to step down. How did this successfully stay a secret for that long?
Well, I think, I don't know, Lisa came back on a Sunday from vacation. So I don't know if that was the 5th or 6th, whatever that Monday was after that weekend. And she came over with a cup of coffee because she'd been on vacation, and I had a little bout with vertigo. So I thought she was just coming to, make sure I was okay, and which she was, but also, just to visit and catch up. And so it was on that Monday that it just, hit her. And then Jenny came too. So Jenny will tell you, when she was driving over, she knew something was up, because we don't usually meet for coffee. Mm-hmm. Someone's like, hey, I'm swinging by, or whatever. So Lisa will tell you, when you know. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what happened, because after the season, we were just rolling, right, going, and there isn't a lot of discussion. And everybody always wants to know, well, was this the plan? Did you know? Well, this was the hopeful plan, but no, we didn't know, because it's so unique. Like, I was just always enjoying the ride, as was Jenny, and Lisa was too, but knowing as you get farther along down the road, there's probably going to be an end game. So just different conversations would really pop up organically. But when you're always talking about it, she would hope that I got to take over, and I was hoping that I would get to take over, but there wasn't a master plan. It just, when she made the decision, then everything swung into action, and then everything you kind of talked about for the last few years, then it became, more of an action instead of a thought.
So everybody's staying.
Yeah.
All the players are staying. All the recruits are still aboard. Were there any, or were there many hard sells where you really, really had to re-recruit?
No, and that's where I felt just so grateful. It was really a really cool, hard, not to be, hyperbole here, but it was kind of a beautiful thing. Like when we told the team we had a Zoom because they were all over. But as you can imagine the reactions, right? Because they're like, what? So there's kind of surprise, there's some tears, there's some quiet, but it was all like based on so much love. They were, bummed because they love Coach Bluder, right? And then also gratitude and then understanding, because it's like, oh wow, yeah, she has done this a long time and she's earned that retirement, and it's been a great ride. And then they shifted to like, we're so thankful it's you, Coach Jay, right? And so we had all of it, and everybody was kind of choked up but also like excited. And so then I followed up with conversations, right? I mean, the portal is what it is, right? You just know that it's, there's lots of stories. I think in the men's game, especially after games this season, assistant coach kind of gives that hug and like, call me, man. So it's just part of what we do. So I made sure I reached out to everybody individually, and some people had longer talks, never about not being here, but just about the uncertainty. And I think all of those conversations were great. And then, of course, the class of 25, they were next, and the 24, the incomers, much to the same emotion, but not one of them skipped a beat, which I felt so great about. And Lisa was with me calling everybody, and that was, I think, just another sign of, just how much fun it's been working together and how much of a team it's always been. I won't forget that day for sure. That was probably one of the most intense emotional days, because you wanted to keep it intact as much as you could. And there was a lot of intense conversations in a relatively short amount of time before it hit the news, and then just continued afterwards, then the class of 25, and then we kind of worked our way to the younger classes.
So you still got Abby, you still got Raina, you still got Tanaya. What'll Lisa's role be as advisor?
Yeah, we haven't really ironed out all of that, but I think just with the changing landscape with, the NILs and the collectives, and looking how that's going to change with the revenue sharing, certainly with her, ties and her connections, but her perspective. I think that will be the biggest, if you want to say, action area. And then the other side of it is, it'll be a great confidant. She can kind of watch from afar. She'll drop into practice, but it's someone, kind of right down the hall that, she's not going to be right down the hall, but in the sense of she's right down the road, the call, she's not moving to Florida. When she's still very much active, what she wants to do. And she's got some really, I think, really cool plans for her next chapter, if you will. But it's just going to be someone that she's been here. She knows what it's like to sit there. She doesn't want it anymore, but she can be as that, God, what a great consultant without having to be here every day.
Right.
So personally, kind of like your consultant for me, but for the program, she's still going to be in touch with the kids every now and then, and certainly with that, the NIL piece.
Will you add one more to your staff, or is this your staff?
I'm going to add a couple more.
Okay.
So I'll fill the coaching role I had, but not necessarily an associate head coach, but there'll be a coach there, and then we'll also do Jenny's role. But it won't be necessarily assigned or look like our staff was. There's been some coaching changes. It used to be only 4 coaches could be off campus and recruit. Now there can be 6.
Okay.
Only 4 at a time, but that changes how you fill positions, because now you can really grow coaches. You can give them a great experience of a variety of tasks, because when there was only 4, you could have your DOBO, your player development, your assistant to the head coach position, but all they could do was task specific. They could never help in recruiting. And that's so much, if you want to be a coach, that's so much of what you do. So I really think that was a wise move by the NCAA. The other positions, the other 2, they're not going to be doing it as much as I am, or Raina or Abby, but they can do it. But with hiring, that makes it different, because you were just like really specifically, okay, this person's not going to recruit, so I'm just looking for this skill set. Now when I've hired, I'm looking for people that I want to grow or they want to grow, and they can do a little bit of everything, but then obviously, fill the gaps that we need.
Will those be announced pretty soon? Or?
Yeah, the job has to be posted for a certain amount of time. So we're nearing the end of that. So then after they're posted, then you can begin the interview process. So I'm hopeful, what is this, June 4th? I would love it within 10 days that we could have a lot of movement and hopefully get them named. But I'd say safest 2 weeks. 2 weeks from now, we should know.
So you said you had other head coaching offers. I don't know what you can share and not share, but what might have been the most difficult to turn down?
Well, I think, your alma mater, right? Mm-hmm. I love Drake. And that's been, that story's been shared a lot. And
was that when Jenny Baranchek was hired? Or was
yeah,
that
you can sure, I wouldn't say that, you're in the strong running.
Right.
So the thing when you say that is when you're a coach, it's like recruiting for some people. Like, you really want someone, but if they don't want you, you don't really offer them if they're a hard no, because then it kind of, like, it's a trickle-down effect, right? You got to kind of do your homework, and then sometimes it's a fair competition, most of the time in recruiting, right? You want 3 or 4 players, and you're like, okay, this is my first choice, second choice, all of that. But if someone, you're like, hey, we really like you, and they're like, I don't like you, right? Well, then it changes things. So I'm not so arrogant to think that the people that I had talked to over the years that I would have gotten it. I got the feeling, though, had I pursued a little bit harder, I might have had a lot more opportunities. There were 3 of them that, in the time had said, hey, we would love to have you. You're our person. Are you interested? So, there was 3 to 4 of those, but then probably take my name out of it. If you're a long time, a Big Ten, ACC assistant, and certain jobs open, you're in the running immediately just from the vast experience that you've had. So there was a handful of those, but I'd say, there was a couple Power Fives that came open that were in my wheelhouse that were probably more intriguing than some of the others. But I only use Drake because that's the emotional one. And that's my, I have 2 favorite schools in my life, and it's Drake and it's Iowa. Mm-hmm. Drake has always been special, and I grew up at Drake. And that's kind of part of when you grow up at Drake, and then I spent 8 years there. Then when I left, then you kind of, you have a choice to let it remain, that beautiful, special, everything it was, and keep it garnering new experiences, or go back. And different times in my life, every time I kept coming back to it, I just chose to let it be, everything in my mind, it was just always, idyllic. And, unless you work at some place, you can always do that. But anywhere you work, it's going to have its challenges, right? So that was always the hardest one to, I should say, maybe not necessarily turning down, but always not pursuing as hard, right? Is that fair?
Yep,
right?
Absolutely. So you talked, I think you got your biggest laugh when you were at the press conference when you were talking about full court press and things that you hadn't been able to do before.
Right.
What changes might the fans or the public see with your team going forward, and what changes might we not see?
Well, we're in the process of which we do every year, we kind of evaluate what we like, what we didn't like. What will remain the same is, I'm an old 6-on-6 player too, as Lisa was, Jenny was, and, we have a tendency to favor the offense, right? So I'm going to obviously continue scoring and trying to score fast, right? That's just kind of been a hallmark of our Drake teams and to here. So that will be, continuing. Over time, we've always had different debates on how much full court pressure would we like to do. Do you recruit to a team that has more depth, that has more antagonistic, people that are longer and leaner, that could play on, on the ball, have your quick guys, women behind them. And a lot of times it came down to we just didn't want to fatigue anyone because our offense was kind of always won the battle. So I would like to do a little bit more experimenting with that. I'm not advocating that we're going to turn into a stringer team of her successful days here, or currently Ohio State. They do that really, really well. But I think that's something I would like to explore, what we're in the process of exploring. You know, this year's going to be so much different for us anyway, because, I mean, even if Lisa would stay and there's no coaching change, it's going to be a different year. I mean, we didn't just graduate, you know, an amazing class. We graduated one of the best to ever do it in such a unique way in Caitlin Clark. So that type of orbit that we were living in, we all knew it was rare, along with, you know, Kate Martin. How cool is it what she's doing right now in Vegas? Gabby Marshall's importance, obviously, the role playing of Sharon Goodman and, you know, Molly Davis, you know, sparking us for those 2 years. So, and this is nothing, I mean, Bobby Knight could be sitting here right now and he would be saying, like, it's going to look a little differently. I mean, you can't just like say, okay, we're going to be just normal and just going to be business as usual. That was the end of an era that was phenomenal. And I just like to say, now we got to go back to doing it more the old-fashioned way. You know, when we shoot threes, they're going to be around the three-point line. They're not going to be from, you know, the parking lot. And that's what I think made that era so different, is you had such a great player in Caitlin Clark, who was IQ, smart, competitive, but she had a skill set that no one has had other than Steph Curry. So the eyes on this program, you know, it just separated us. So now, hopefully, we're going to capitalize with the eyes that were on us and continue to play that style of basketball that we've had, I think, for most of our tenure here. Even, you know, going back to Sam Logic era, our first round draft pick for the WNBA, and then into Megan Gustafson. Even though we weren't shooting as far out like Caitlin was, I think that joy that people liked, I think that teamwork and just enjoyment and most of the time, pretty basketball, I think that's been evident. It just feels like it would just happen this year because all of a sudden the conversation was, you know, Caitlin Clark and Iowa basketball. So it will look different, but, you know, the 4-out, 1-in, that's what we've been playing. We've also had some success. I like some two-post offenses at times, depending on your post. Now, I think I know who we have coming in and what, you know, Ava Hayden, one of our incomings, is capable of. But until you get them here, you don't really know exactly. But if, you know, it is apparent that Ava and Hannah and an Addie could be on the floor together, you might see us look different. Because the past, really, 8 out of 9 years, 9 out of 10, we've been a 4-out, 1-in offense. So I think that would be the biggest shifts you may see this year.
You said you're not shying away from greatness.
Yeah.
You're not shying away from great. How do you define greatness?
I think that's a great question. I feel like the standard's been set here, right? But what I think is what I love about the experience that you gain, or the aging process, if you will, as a coach. When you're young, it's always about the end of the season, and that's how you're measured, is how you measure it. Is, did we get to the NCAA tournament? How deep did we go? Did we win the conference? You know, whatever that was, way back at Drake to now. But as you get older, you realize that it's that whole journey that sets you up for the end. And I think as we go through this year, specifically, there's just so many questions on how we're going to look. You know, we have 6 new people we're trying to, you know, mesh in with only 2 starters returning. So measuring greatness, right, is, I think there's 2 sides. The immeasurable is how enjoyable and how fun is practice every day while we're really working hard. What does that greatness look like to try to really uphold I think the hallmark of our programs is culture and chemistry. And that greatness is really difficult to do, but everybody that watches this, the majority would just think, oh man, they're just great kids. They're just so fun. but you have to work really, really hard on that culture and that chemistry. And the women on your team have to be really willing to give up a lot of the things they were for the good of the group. So I think chasing greatness, part of it is if we can get this group, 6 new players, all coming in, the 9th ranked recruiting class, a heck of a portal get, if we can get them operating on the same plane, that it's not about me as an individual, it's about us. That's how I think you chase greatness, to be a team that is enjoyable and that is really, really setting an example of, I think, how to live life. When it's not all about, you, it's about how I can make it better around. And to me, that's chasing greatness. But when you're talking about on the court stuff, I mean, we make NCAA tournaments, right? So I think there's a measure of success of that. You would like to continue that. Now, I'm not going to set those examples or set those goals without seeing the eyes of my new team. But I pretty much know, how they're wired, and I think that's where you just want to stay in that conversation of being one of the top programs that always puts itself in a position to cut down a net. And I think that's what chasing greatness is. It isn't selling yourself short. It isn't like, oh man, we're going to try as be the best we can be. It's like, no, this is where we want to be. Understanding we're adding 4 major teams to this league with one of the most renowned players in Juju from USC. So not shying away and not, oh shucks, we're going to be all right. It's like, no, this is where we want to be. And the expectations are high. And I want to be an NCAA team. But where those goals, exactly where they are, I haven't really thought about where I want to be, but I know I always want to cut down the net.
Have you come to terms with Beth as far as number of years for your contract?
We're in the process of that, but I would think it'll be 5. That'd be awesome, but we're just working on that right now.
So how, we talked a little bit about this, but how will the recruiting be divvied up? So there will be 6 people involved,
Yeah.
4 can leave at a time.
Yeah, and that's, I think, what's going to be interesting to bring that up is we've never had the ability to have 6. So I've talked a little bit with our staff, Abby and Raina, and by the way, they are fantastic, and I said they were my 2 greatest blessings, and I think commitments, so when I took the job, will forever be, is that they didn't skip a beat and were excited and looking forward to, continuing chasing greatness. And, there's going to be a lot of people that are uncertain for many reasons, right? The fans, our fellow colleagues. So they're excited about that challenge, and certainly so is our team. They're going to hear a lot that we don't have Caitlin anymore and Gabby and Kate, right? So you got to use that to the positive. So having Abby and Raina, I'm just so thankful, and, I love them as sisters, and I think that's been what's fun about our staff is we've all been really, really tight, and I think why they didn't skip a beat is because we've had that, right? So when I've talked with Raina and Abby, is we're kind of formulating the plan what that looks like, right? Like how often do we rotate it to that 5th and 6th person, right? Because if you're putting someone in my office, right, that's usually the 4 that could go out. The head coach, my office, Raina and Abby. But now we have 2 other positions. Do we make that consistent? Is it every 3rd high school game does that person go to? Do we give them a couple states that they're ahead of? Do we give them a class? Are they the younger, the class of 27 and 28? So that's all kind of a work in progress, and we're all just kind of have an assignment of how do we see that really working. But I know, us 3 will be the main recruiters, and then depending on who the other 2 are that I hire, we'll see how that kind of fits in. But I think every coaching staff is going to be kind of challenged at the beginning of how to best utilize that 6, because you can get it watered down so much that everybody's doing a little bit of everything, but maybe you don't, hone into the sharpness of what you used to be. So I think we got to be careful in how we're going to make that happen.
Probably allows you to stay fresh too. I mean,
That's
you
what
don't
I
have to
like.
be out for all
That,
of it.
absolutely, and that's where I think it'll give us a little bit of a reprieve, especially, I told, if you've been going pretty hard for like 3 weeks and you feel like you've seen a lot of the people, it's nice to give someone experience, but you can also recharge your batteries. And I think how the NCAA did it is good. Like in the summer, we recruit long weekends in July. So you have to pick, like it'd be us four, like that weekend. There's no switching out, you know, Bailey goes till Saturday and he comes back and another, it's us four that weekend, which is great. Then you know you're off that weekend. In the school year, every day can change and there's never 4 off at a time. But it's like, you know, we can just rotate. So I think that'll be really nice to do it that way.
What would you be doing if you weren't coaching? What if you would, back in 1991, if you know, that was the end of basketball for you?
A president of St. Olaf College in Northfield, Minnesota. That was for some reason, that was my little dream job of a liberal arts to start, you know, like, I didn't know if it'd really be St. Olaf, but I'd gone to a recruiting camp there when I was getting my master's. I got my master's in higher education. And any Drake student that went to school in a certain era with Dr. Don Adams, Don just took me under his wing, Dr. Adams, and he was my mentor. I would go sit in his office, and he was always talking to me about his job was kind of leading students. And we had the path marked out, and he was really believing in me to be a college president. And I liked the thought of that because I love Drake, and we had the plan mapped out. And then my basketball career started to skyrocket. And then when I went overseas and played professionally, you know, now they call it a gap year, right?
Yeah.
And then when I came back, I was not intending to coach. I was going to get a GA position, and so Lisa was going to take me, so that was great. Well, then she had a coach leave late, and then she didn't like her pool of candidates for the full-time gig, and then she believed in me so much, and she said, well, why don't you just do the full-time? If you know, would you consider coaching real? I said, well, yeah, that'd be fun. So my 2-year plan of GA went to 5. And Drake at that time, I think they still do, they had tuition rebate. So I could go to school and get my master's paid for because I was working there free. So I was like, basketball, this is great. I don't, you know, slow classes, I get a coach, my alma mater. Well, then the rest is history because I fell in love with coaching. So I would say that. And then even though I don't like the you know, the feel of politics now, I think my grandmother was president of the Republican Women in Audubon County for 55 years. And she had a very much influence. And back then, the Republican Party kind of was a little bit more liberal in some ways. Not liberal, but moderate, and was trying to make good change. I think now, if she was still alive, she wouldn't like anything on either side of the aisle. But she would always talk to me about that a little bit. But I think now we need quality people in that political realm. Not that there isn't, but boy, there's sure a lot of dissension.
What one thing are you most excited about this season?
That's a good question. I just think like the people I'm envisioning on our staff, just that the newness for growth for everybody. I feel like there's gonna be a really good feel on our staff, and I'm excited about that. And I think I'm excited about kind of putting into action everything I've learned from, in my opinion, a GOAT in Lisa Bluder. You know, we work so closely, and then Jenny too. I mean, Jenny and myself and Lisa, we had such a great ride, but there were so many things that happened. You know, you can't go through all those years, all of it kind of happens to you. But I think now, you know, just kind of excited to kind of hopefully pass on what she's passed on to me. And you get to have that opportunity. I mean, certainly it's a lot more pressure. Certainly there's, you know, there'll be times I'm sure you wonder because you're used to bouncing something off. But I think just that opportunity just to kind of, you know, grow and see what I've learned over those years. And I just like that for our staff too, right? Because it's newness. And I think, you know, we're leaning into the moment. You know, I wasn't ready to retire. right? And I kidded Jenny and Lisa, I'm like, well, we obviously know who's younger amongst us three, because I am still energetic and ready to go. But I'm just excited that I got to continue, because some people are looking at this new era of revenue sharing and kind of, oh, you know, and the NIL, like, man. And there can be negative with it. But if you want to keep going and growing, you got to figure out how to, you know, solve the puzzle. You know, what's the best formula in this new era to be successful? And can you keep your model like we've had, you know, that team culture, that everyone's a part of it in this new era? And so I think, you know, it's not just that I'm starting as a head coach, but it's starting with some challenges. You're starting with expectations that are back-to-back Final Fours. You've graduated a GOAT in Caitlin Clark. A GOAT that led the program for years is gone. And oh yeah, there's revenue sharing, and we got to put a rein on that NIL somehow. So I think you can look at it like, whoa, that's a lot. Or you can look at it, yeah, that's a lot, but there's so much that's different that in some ways, you know, really in all ways, no one's ever been here like it is now, right? A lot of times when there's a coaching change, it's like, okay, you know, talk about football 10 years ago, you talk about, you know, when Kirk Ferentz took over Hayden Fry, most of the rules were status quo, right? It's all gonna change. I mean, if you really dig into what revenue sharing is, I mean, it's a whole different deal. And I think business as usual is gone. And so now the trick is, for those of us who liked it, that team chemistry, all this, how can you be successful in this brand new model? So I've been fortunate. I've been at ground zero with NIL, with arguably the most famous athlete on the planet. Because if you would have said when NIL started, you said, who do you think that NIL guy is going to be? Everybody would have rose their hand, and probably an SEC quarterback. Or the other half of the room would have said probably a male post or point guard in either the Big 12 or the Big 10. No one would have said a female in any sport. And so as that, Caitlin Clark hit it at the right time, and boy, did she capitalize on the NIL. So we were learning and growing and trying to figure that whole thing out, as was, you know, Caitlin and her family. So there was no formula for any of that. And so now I feel like that worked out pretty well. So now we're coming in and there's no formula because we didn't know the rules yet. I went to the Big Ten meetings and it was really well explained, but we all left there like, okay, what is that exactly? So you're like, okay, but you're at ground zero again. So that doesn't happen much in careers. You know, like you don't get the opportunity to really start something and then hopefully do it well and do it successfully. So while everybody is probably looking at, you know, me chasing greatness, and they're probably just looking at what's our staff going to do and wins, losses, Big Ten wise, it's really so different. And it's going to cause a lot of, I think, consternation in our staff when we're learning how to formulate a roster. So I think that's going to be fun.
So we talked about what you're most excited about. What's your biggest concern this season? What?
I think that the outside expectations, right? Of just like what everybody is like, what, you know, you're talking about, how do I, when I'm chasing greatness, what are their expectations of, you know, how are we going to feel when we make a three-pointer that's, you know, right behind the line? You know, are we going to just be disappointed it's not where that mark is, where Caitlin hit all the time, that 22 on the floor, you know, is just the concerns of allowing this team, allowing this staff to become who they can be. And that was the same thing we did last year. We were trying not to compare last year's team to the team before. I think this year it's even more important because there's so much newness that is, my biggest concern is that people will just, you know, continue to be behind us and enjoy this team for who they are and get behind them. So that would be my biggest, and that would be whether I'm in this chair or not, just because these kids work so hard, and there's going to be a shift for them because their roles are going to change immensely now, right? So I'd say that's the biggest one.
What should we expect? What are your expectations from the 6 newcomers?
You know, I think my expectations are going to be really fun. We have some really fun personalities. We got some crafty players. All of them are hardworking. They're so excited to be here. And they were so proud of our runs the last 2 years because a couple of them have been committed longer, and then a couple committed before the season, and they've just been so into it. And I think they understand how special this place is when it is sold out. I think they desire that, right? But they're a fun group. I love them as people. And we usually do, but this group's got a little fun synergy together, and there's some little leaders in it too, boy. When this coaching change happened, a couple of them are like, we got you. Who do we need to call? What do you need me to do? You know, they're kind of self-starters, and self-starters are really fun to coach, but they're also, they have a pretty good a propensity to be really fun to watch too.
What veteran or veterans do you feel are primed for a breakthrough this year?
Well, I mean, I think we're going to count on Sid Alfolter and Hannah Stolke a lot, and I love their confidence and their mindset right now. Sid's leading everybody so well. Hannah's continued to take a step in her confidence and her, her persona and her presence. I think, would like to, get Taylor some more minutes. She has certainly the ability to be a walking bucket. I think we could see some things from Kylie Feuerbach. When you're playing with like the team that had played for so many years together, Gabby and Caitlin and Kate, they had such an unspoken way of doing things, and this will be, I think, fun for the other guys. Everybody's going to be able to kind of learn, there isn't that built in. Even though that was great, I just think we're going to see some of those guys shine a little bit more.
What one thing or what progression in the 24 years turned this program from a good program to, an elite program, and what's your plan to keep it great?
Yeah. Well, I think what happened, we hit that Sweet 16 year with Sam Logic, but we got Sam Logic. She was, one of the top recruits in the nation. And I remember where I was getting groceries in the Hy-Vee at the Tone Spice area. I was getting spices, and I got that call, and I showed a pretty good vertical, I will say, in that Tone Spice aisle. But I remember getting a player like her, her ability, but her mindset. And then she kind of began to change, how we did things. And then we had that Sweet 16 year, and then that helped us get Megan. Megan was a top 100 kid, but she was the post player that just was such a hard worker. And when we got her and we could start working with her, and then when you saw what that kid could do in her motor, so that was just a blessing. I mean, there's never been an easier kid to coach, and just an incredible work ethic. And then that Elite 8 year, right? Well, then that got us to show Caitlin Clark that, hey, yeah, you can stay at home and you can have all the things, right? And so then I think two things now, what has been nice is the Big Ten, like it or not, that expansion and that footprint so big, well, that's allowed us to not seem so far away from these recruits. So Caitlin continued to, her star shined so brightly that people were like, oh, Iowa, right? Instead of like Iowa. It's more like a statement instead of a question. So now we just need to continue to attract a really high level of player, but that still fits our, our expectation as an incredible young woman and role model. So I think the way we stay there is to keep attracting the nation's best, because I've always said, you can't win, a horse race if you don't have the horses, right? You got to have, you can know all the X's and O's that you want, but you have to have a thoroughbred or two to get you where you really want to go. So it's recruiting, recruiting, recruiting.
Last thing, I guess, basically,
Yeah.
is what about Jan Jensen don't people know that maybe should?
I feel like this last while been covered too much, actually. Let's see, what they don't know they should. The should part is the should part. Trying to think of something clever and something real at the same time. Bailey, no, you know a lot about me, Bailey. Feel free to shoot in.
I once sat down with Kirk Ferentz, who would say that after a game, he would go home and have a pint of Ben and Jerry's ice
Right.
cream, and if it was a big win, he'd have two. So I guess what do you do after a big win, Coach?
You know, I think after big wins, like we would get together, but our staff would, we'd order pizza or something. But I don't really have a major like thing like that, which I wish I did. I don't think I'm that interesting. Like, I mean, the things that I have, I don't think anybody would find, there's no things that I do, that, I'm a pretty vigorous worker-outer. I like my Peloton when we go. That's right. Peloton elliptical type of person.
You like George's?
Yeah, George's, that's been some big wins, our staff, just by virtue of where we start out there used to be a chili supper near it, and then we'd have a burger there afterwards. I'm gonna have to get back to you on that one, Jeff.
All right.
I'll think. You don't usually stump me very much, but I drove a pretty good motorcycle back in the day. I had
Really?
a Honda 125 Enduro.
Was that
And I'd go down my-
pre-Drake, or was that Drake?
That was when I was little.
Okay.
When I was on the farm, my best friend from high school, Cammie, who's now a bigwig CEO and a GM of a casino in Vegas, we lived 2.5 miles apart. And how we would go visit each other is we each had a little motorcycle.
Yeah.
She had an 80 Kawasaki. But I think sometimes, that seems like a whole lifetime ago. But I could handle a motorcycle back in the day. Now, I would tell my kids, do not drive a motorcycle. I did have a helmet back then, though. But I will think if there's anything interesting. I know it won't be for the video, but if it is, I'll tell you, and you can. If it's really riveting, you can tweet it.
I think we're done.
All right.
Thanks, Jan.
Yeah, thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
I appreciate it. Yeah.